Hello, UCAR. Peter Christensen here, coming to you from the CEO's desk. Going to talk today a little bit about the blank addendum and how that affects the rest of the contract. Seeing some issues going on. I think people are getting pretty creative with the low inventory. So representing a buyer, throwing in some crazy terms, and there's some confusion as the result sometimes. So what does the blank addendum do? Well, it does really one of three things. You're either adding terms to the contract, or you are modifying existing terms. So you're changing a number, changing a date, or you are eliminating something. So we're going to eliminate this from the contract. The key to all of these is being very, very specific. What we don't want is ambiguity, because we know the buyer's going to understand it one way, seller's going to understand it a different way. Who's right? Who knows? And it doesn't help you to argue over who's right in the middle of the transaction, because ultimately a court would decide, and nobody wants that. So how do we avoid these problems? Well, we've got to be specific and understand the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish. And so I'm going to use an example, maybe a little over the top, but we see examples like this sometimes. Let's say you had a REPSI with the finance and appraisal deadline of March 1st, and then you had a settlement deadline of March 10th. Okay? And the parties are negotiating, and they get to a point where they say, we need a little more time to figure out financing. So they agree, okay, we'll push the finance and appraisal deadline back to March 15th. And so they agree on an addendum, March 15th. What's the settlement deadline now? Well, it's still March 10th, right? Because they didn't actually address the settlement deadline. Now, we've got a problem here because clearly the parties intended the contract, well, maybe clearly, not so clearly. The parties intended the contract to go to March 15th because that's when they put the the finance and appraisal deadline too. So what does that mean? Well, we've created a huge ambiguity now. We don't know when the settlement deadline is meant to be. The clear reading of the contract would say the settlement deadline is March 10th, and the finance and appraisal deadline is after that on March 15th, which clearly is ineffective by that point. So what does the language say in the blank addendum? It says, to the extent the terms of this addendum modify or conflict with any provisions of the REPSI, including all prior addenda and counteroffers, these terms shall control. So some people will make the argument, well, it conflicts with the settlement deadline because now the finance and appraisal deadline is March 15th. So we got to automatically change the settlement deadline to March 15th. Does it conflict with that deadline? It's a separate deadline. So it creates a question, and neither party is going to have clarity on what's going to go forward. So when we're looking at changing terms, make sure we understand the big picture. If you're changing one deadline, how does that affect the other deadlines? The one we're seeing most right now, that I'm getting the most questions on, is that buyer agrees to pay $10,000 above appraised price. So offer comes in over the asking price, and they settle on that as the purchase price, but they're worried that the appraisal is going to come in low. So they say, well, we're still willing to pay. Buyer will pay $10,000 above appraised value. What does that mean? Is that just an announcement? Does it mean that the seller's agreeing to modify the price? We don't have a clear understanding here. I don't think we do. And so it's going to create problems. So what we've got to do is make clear what we're trying to accomplish. Are we trying to announce something? If so, okay, I don't know that you need an addendum to do that. If we're trying to actually change something, then let's be clear. This is attempting to modify the purchase price. You know, you've got to have more robust language than that. And so any term we're dealing with in the REPSI that we're trying to change, be specific. Cite the section you're trying to change. Make it clear that both parties agree to modify this date. Both parties agree to change this term in the contract. Clarity is absolutely key. And when in doubt, have an attorney help you draw up the language. That's what they're trained to do, is to see these things and these errors and catch them and get them right. So Be careful out there as we get creative. It opens up the door for lots of possibilities and potential problems. What we want is a clear understanding coming out of the contract of what terms both parties are agreeing to in the addendum. Hopefully that helps. Remember, this is not meant to be legal advice. If you need specific legal advice, please contact your attorney. This is legal information only. Just trying to help you get it right and keep you out of trouble. So if you have comments, if you want something clarified, if you want a topic covered, please leave those in the comments, and thanks for tuning in.